Morning light dripped through the blinds like golden threads. Taehyung stirred before Jungkook. His first instinct was to turn away and pretend none of last night had happened, but the warmth in his arms, the quiet weight of Jungkook curled against him, kept him still. He's still here. He didn't pull away in the night. Taehyung stayed like that, unmoving, staring at the ceiling as if it had answers. The ache in his chest wasn't guilt anymore. It was fragile hope. Jungkook shifted slightly, murmuring something in his sleep. Then, his lashes fluttered. And Taehyung froze. Their eyes met. No words. Just slow blinking. Sleepy surprise. Hesitation. Then, a quiet whisper, "Good morning." Taehyung's heart clenched. Good morning. They didn't move. Didn't need to. Jungkook's voice was hoarse, hesitant. Did you sleep okay with you? Yeah, Taehyung admitted. It was the first good sleep in months. Jungkook didn't smile, not fully, but something softened in his eyes. Taehyung reached up, brushing a strand of hair from Jungkook's cheek. He didn't know what gave him the courage to lean in, but he did. Slow, careful, like he was approaching a wounded bird. Their lips met, a kiss so brief it could have been mistaken for nothing at all. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Jungkook didn't pull away. Instead, he whispered, "That didn't feel wrong." Taehyung's throat tightened. It didn't feel wrong because it wasn't. Jungkook bit his lip, looking down at Taehyung's hand, still resting on his cheek. Then why does it still hurt? Because I broke it, Taehyung said. Us. And even if I glue it back together, the cracks still ache when it rains. Jungkook nodded slowly. It's been raining for a while now, then maybe it's time to dry off, Taehyung whispered. Together, it. And then, Jungkook slowly scooted closer, resting his forehead against Taehyung's chest. Not forgiveness. Not a full restart. But a first step. Taehyung closed his eyes. Maybe, he thought, we'll be okay. Jungkook didn't mean to fall asleep again after the kiss. But maybe that's what trust looks like now. Feeling safe enough to close your eyes next to someone who once made you feel invisible. When he woke a second time, the bed was empty. The spot beside him was still warm, though. Jungkook rubbed his eyes and sat up, listening to the soft sounds from the kitchen. Cabinets opening. A pan placed gently on the stove. The low hum of Taehyung humming something, a tune he couldn't place, but knew by heart. He's making breakfast. A strange ache twisted in Jungkook's chest. Because once upon a time, that was a daily thing. Quiet mornings with coffee and omelets. Jokes passed across the counter. Then, silence. Cold toast. Ignored messages. Jungkook slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen doorway, barefoot. Taehyung stood in front of the stove, messy-haired in a hoodie far too big for him. Jungkook's hoodie, actually. He looked normal. Domestic. Almost like a husband again. Hey, Jungkook said softly. Taehyung turned quickly, eyes warm. Good morning, again, Jungkook nodded. You didn't have to cook. I wanted though. Simple. Unapologetic. Made your favorite, Taehyung added, plating the last of the rolled omelette. Tamagoyaki. I remember you like it with a little sugar, Jungkook blinked, heart clenching. You remember that? Taehyung looked up. I never forgot, Jungkook. I just forgot how to show it, the words hung in the air. Jungkook walked over, pulling out a chair. Taehyung placed the plate in front of him gently, like it might shatter. They ate mostly in silence. But it wasn't heavy this time. It was thoughtful, comfortable. Halfway through the meal, Jungkook said quietly, "I think I'm scared of getting used to this again." Taehyung's hand paused around his chopsticks. "Why?" he asked softly. "Because I don't want to feel it disappear again." Taehyung looked at him, not with guilt, but with quiet sincerity. "Then let me show you that I'm not going anywhere this time." Jungkook met his gaze, eyes glistening. "Promise." Taehyung reached across the table and held his hand. "No rings this time, just skin. Warm and real." "I promise," he whispered. "And this time, I learn how to stay." Later that day, the house was quiet again. But now it was the good kind of quiet. Jungkook sat on the couch, knees stuck to his chest, reading. Taehyung came in with a cup of tea and gently placed it in front of him, brushing his fingers just slightly as he did. Jungkook looked up, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. It was small, careful, but real. And Taehyung, sitting beside him, reached out, not to hold, not to pull, just to rest his hand near his. Close enough to feel. Not yet a beginning. But finally, no longer the end. It was a slow Sunday. Clouds hung lazily outside, and the soft sound of rain tapped against the windows. Taehyung was still asleep. His face half buried in the pillow, long lashes fanned against his cheek, hair tousled like a boy too soft to belong to the man who once broke him. Jungkook stared for a long moment. He'd forgotten how peaceful Taehyung looked like this. How quiet love could feel. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and wandered toward the study, looking for a blanket. But what he found instead was a letter. It sat tucked between a stack of old notebooks, sealed but unsent. Jungkook wouldn't have noticed it if it hadn't had his name written on the front. In Taehyung's handwriting. He froze. The paper felt too heavy in his hands. Like it carried a part of Taehyung's soul that hadn't yet been spoken aloud. Jungkook stared at the envelope for a long minute before sitting down and slowly tearing it open. The letter read, "Kook, I don't know if I'll ever give this to you. Maybe by the time I have the courage, it'll already be too late. But there are things I need to say, even if it's just for myself. I miss you. God, I miss you so much it physically hurts sometimes. I miss your laugh when you're trying not to laugh. I miss the way you talk to the plants like they're people. I miss hearing you sing softly when you think no one's listening. Mostly, I miss the version of me that existed when I was with you. I don't know when I started failing you. Maybe it wasn't all at once. Maybe it was one forgotten date, one closed door, one lie by omission at a time. But the day I heard you crying alone in the bathroom and didn't knock, that's when I realized I was becoming someone you'd need to hear from. I don't want to be that man anymore. Even if you never forgive me. Even if you move on. I hope the world gives you love in the quiet ways you deserve. I hope someone wakes up early just to watch you sleep. I hope they call you by your name, only your name, and say it like it's the only word they ever want to remember. And if by some miracle, this letter ever finds you and your heart isn't completely closed to me, I want to come home. To you. Always, Taehyung." Jungkook sat frozen. The paper trembled in his hands. He hadn't cried in days, not since the night Taehyung came back to bed, but now. Tears slid down silently. And when he turned around, he found Taehyung standing in the doorway, barefoot, half asleep, and watching him. "You weren't supposed to find that," Taehyung said, voice hoarse. Jungkook stood, holding the letter to his chest. "Why didn't you give it to me?" he whispered. "Because I was still scared you'd say no." Jungkook crossed the room slowly, eyes never leaving his. He placed the letter against Taehyung's chest, then pressed his hand over it. "I'm saying yes now," he whispered. Taehyung's eyes fluttered shut. Just once. Like a prayer finally answered. He pulled Jungkook into a hug so tight, it felt like the world went quiet again. And in the middle of that silence, Jungkook finally let himself believe, maybe this love had always been worth saving. The rain didn't stop. It had been pouring all afternoon, turning the city into a watercolor of grays and blurred headlights. But inside the apartment, everything was warm, the lights dim low, the scent of honey tea curling through the air. Jungkook stood by the window, his fingers pressed to the glass. Taehyung then offered to cook dinner, half distracted by a playlist Jungkook made years ago, which was now humming from the speaker in the corner. Jungkook watched him from afar. Taehyung still cooked with that same little crease between his brows, still danced slightly when he thought no one noticed. Still called it a kitchen even though Jungkook never corrected him. Because maybe, just maybe, it was again. "Dinner's ready," Taehyung called out gently. "You okay?" Jungkook nodded, but his voice caught before he could answer. He didn't know why the lump in his throat had returned. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was that song playing. Or maybe it was because he finally had Taehyung back, and he still didn't know how to believe it. Dinner was quiet, save for the soft clinking of utensils and the music in the background. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. But later that night, when they lay in bed with the storm still whispering against the windows, Jungkook stirred from sleep. He sat up, chest tight. Sweat clung to his back, and his breath came shallow. A dream, no, a memory, had crept in while he slept. One of Taehyung leaving, slamming the door. Of Jungkook screaming after him, unheard. The room was dark, the thunder distant. But it felt like the night all over again. Until warm arms wrapped around his waist from behind. "You're shaking," Taehyung murmured, voice heavy with sleep. "Jungkook, you okay?" Jungkook's voice cracked. "Just a bad dream." Taehyung pulled him down gently, pressing Jungkook's back to his chest. He whispered against his nape, slow and quiet. "You're not alone anymore." That's when Jungkook turned, crawling into Taehyung's arms like muscle memory. He buried his face in his chest, and Taehyung just held him, no questions, no apologies. Just arms around him, a hand brushing through his hair, lips pressing once to his temple. "I didn't think you'd stay," Jungkook whispered. "Not really, I didn't think you'd forgive me," Taehyung replied. "But you did." The silence wrapped around them again, this time softer. And then Taehyung whispered, "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" Jungkook looked up, heart thudding. "The night you cried in the bathroom. I almost knocked," Taehyung said. "I stood outside for so long. But I didn't. I was scared you'd tell me to leave. I think about that night more than I care to admit." Jungkook blinked away the tears. "You can knock now," Taehyung smiled faintly. "I don't have to anymore." And then, without permission, Jungkook leaned forward, closing the last inch between them, and kissed him. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't perfect. It was trembling and hesitant, like a door being unlocked for the first time in years. But it was real. And when they finally pulled away, foreheads pressed, Breaths mingling, Taehyung whispered, "Welcome home, Kook."